We have now come to the final session of our SG60 conference, a dialogue with Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Trade and Industry, Mr. Gan Kim Yong. The session will be moderated by Mr. David Rennie, geopolitics editor from The Economist and a senior journalist with extensive experience covering developments in Washington, D.C. and in Beijing. May I now invite DPM Gan and Mr. Rennie on stage, please.
Thank you very much, and welcome to a real highlight of the day after the Prime Minister's speech. This morning we have the man of the hour, the Deputy Prime Minister, who has just come back from negotiations in the United States on trade. So obviously easy, nothing challenging there. And then I think you've just been to Osaka to see your country's pavilion at the expo, is that right?
That's right.
So I gather you have a few remarks you're going to make, and then we're very keen to get as many questions from the audience as possible, so please don't be shy, get ready to line up at the microphones with your questions for the Deputy Prime Minister. But Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. I just want to say a few words. First, I want to thank you for inviting me to this conference to have a chance to speak to you. Other than answering difficult questions, I would also like to hear your views on the issues that are close to your heart. I've just come back from US and stopping over in Osaka to visit the Singapore Pavilion at our expo. And I would like to make a pitch for our expo pavilion. If you have a time, if you are in Japan, do drop in Osaka and pay a visit to our pavilion. It's outstanding. It's red in color. It's a sphere. It's a little red dot, we call it. I think it represents Singapore very well. And I'll show you a very enjoyable experience. And the Prime Minister spoke this morning, and all of you have heard his speech. I think we talked about the world that we are facing that's increasingly becoming uncertain and full of challenges and difficulties moving forward, and a lot of variability. So I think it is something that we have to confront with. But at the same time, we are also strengthening Singapore's value proposition to the world by being a trusted, reliable partner. We will continue to work with like-minded countries to move forward our economic agenda. As I said, I just came back from US, just to give you a very quick update of my discussion in US. I went there with 4 key objectives. First is to have a first-hand information and assessment of the economy, how it's going, where it's moving towards, what's the outlook like. And secondly, to meet up with various congressmen from both parties, to engage them, to share with them about Singapore, and thirdly, to meet up with the administration to discuss areas of collaboration, how we can deepen our cooperation to create more opportunities for us, and lastly, to also discuss issues relating to the tariff. On the first issue of economy, it's surprising that the US economy continues to be relatively resilient. When I meet many businessmen in the US as well as academicians, the feedback I get is that the economy outlook seems cautiously optimistic, maybe because of the big, beautiful bill that President Trump has just passed that has entrenched the tax cuts and the benefits and support for the businesses. So the outlook seems to be quite optimistic, albeit cautiously so. Secondly, at the same time, inflation seems to be muted, and they expect maybe one of the reasons is because the full impact of the tariff hasn't flown through yet. So they are still waiting to see whether costs will go up in the second half of the year. But so far, inflation seems to be moderated. So I think these are reasonably good news for the economy. And unemployment rate has also been stable, has not spiked up. So I think overall, most of American businesses are cautiously optimistic about the future. Secondly, when I met the congressmen, several of them from both parties, I tried to impress on them the good relationship that Singapore has with the US, the long-term and deep engagement that we have, and particularly US has a trade surplus with Singapore, unlike many other countries. And we are also keen to continue to explore how we can work together with the US, and we hope the congressmen will continue to support Singapore's engagement with the US. And when I met the US administration, we also talked about cooperation between the two countries beyond just tariffs and beyond just investment and trade. We also discussed the cooperation in digital economy, in the, climate change, in sustainability, in the green economy, and how we can continue to work together in many of these areas that have potential for growth. And I also encourage them to continue to engage Asia, not just Singapore, but the larger Asia, because ASEAN, for example, is a fast-growing region and a very important economic region for the US. So I encourage them to continue to engage with us and to find ways to work together between US, Singapore, US, and ASEAN. And lastly, on tariffs, we discussed the tariff that the US has introduced since Liberation Day in April, and particularly Singapore is subject to the minimum baseline tariff of 10%. So my first question to them is, can we negotiate on the 10%? Can we try to reduce it or eliminate the 10%? I think the answer for the time being was quite obvious. They are not in the mood to discuss any discount to the baseline tariff, which I think I shared with many of you earlier. But we also want to put a place marker to remind the US that at any point in time in future, if there's flexibility to discuss the baseline tariff, we are interested in negotiating on the baseline tariffs. So I think we just want to register our interests. At the same time, when we discuss with them, I think that US has mentioned several times that the baseline tariff may be adjusted going forward. So we also wanted to know whether the baseline tariff will stay at 10% or will it be higher or lower. And the answer was non-committal, and they are still reviewing the tariff, and in time to come, they will make the appropriate announcement. So we'll just have to wait and see. I think there's significant uncertainties. I did not have a chance to meet the Secretary Lutnick, and therefore we didn't go into details on negotiation on the pharmaceutical tariffs. And I think the administration's focus now is to finish the negotiation on reciprocal tariffs. So after that, then they will start to engage countries on specific sectoral tariffs like pharmaceuticals or semiconductors. So I think that, in a nutshell, is what I have engaged the US to discuss on. And generally, I think we continue to have very good working relationship between the US and Singapore, and we are happy to see that the US has completed negotiation with several countries and several groups, economic groups, including the EU, and I think this gives us a sense that there's a good progress in the tariff negotiation. But I also come back with a sense that there remains significant uncertainty. I'm not sure whether the uncertainty has really been eliminated or even reduced. Say, for example, to start with, despite the fact that they have completed negotiation with several countries, the details are not yet fully discussed or disclosed. And how, for example, the definition of rules of origin, how do you determine the rules of origin, the details are not out yet. And how to implement some of these tariffs, because it's very complicated to have different tariffs for different countries, and how do you deal with the inter-country transfers, transshipment, re-exports, remanufacturing, and value-added manufacturing, and so on. How do you account for the contribution, the components from different countries? The details have not been worked out, both in terms of definition as well as implementation. On top of that, there's also uncertainty as to the sectoral tariffs, and which has not been determined. And the baseline tariff, as I mentioned, whether it will stay at 10% or whether it will be higher, is something that we remain yet to be seen. And beyond the tariffs discussion, there's also the question of how countries will respond as a result of tariff negotiation. Let's say, for example, the EU has committed to make an investment of $550 billion over a period of time, and whether these investments will be new investments or whether they will be investments that will be diverted from investments into other countries is a question that we do not know yet. Japan has also committed investments into US, and Japan has been a major investor in Singapore. Whether the Japanese investment in Singapore will be diverted into US is a second question that is yet to be seen. So there are uncertainties as to how countries will respond to the outcome of the tariff negotiation. Some countries have also committed to purchase more from US, and they would have been purchasing these products from other countries, whether now instead of purchasing from country A, country B, they will now purchase from US, and therefore exports from these countries to the affected countries will be changed. So I think these uncertainties, second derivative uncertainties that no one is paying much attention yet, because we need to have the tariffs settled, then we'll work out how the secondary impact will be. And then in the medium to longer term, there's also an issue of how the supply chain will be restructured. If countries who have investments in high tariff countries may decide to move their investments to relocate their manufacturing plant to a lower tariff country so as to benefit from the lower tariffs imposed by US. So this will result in shifts in the supply chain. And these shifts are another uncertainty that we are yet to see. The economics will have to be worked out based on the relative tariffs from different countries. But in the longer term, that's medium term, in the longer term, the concern and the uncertainty that we are facing really is how would this impact the overall global trading system, what we call the rules-based multilateral trading system, that we depend on rules, respecting trade agreements with one another, and not to change at will. It's something that has been challenged. Today we may agree with one another on certain tariffs, but tomorrow something happens, I will decide to change my tariff rate that I impose on you. And that is something that is very uncertain, and that has been seen over the last few months as you see tariffs being negotiated. We have a minimum baseline tariff of 10%, and it is at the risk of being adjusted going forward, and whether that will be the final tariff, no one can tell. So the uncertainty, in fact, over the last few months has been raised. It is something that we will need to recognize and to adjust ourselves and to respond to it. And I'll talk about response later on, otherwise I'll finish all the time that we have. So I'll leave it now back to David. Thank you very much.
Noel, thank you for that brilliant sort of tour of the horizon, because you've been right in the sort of the thick of these negotiations. If it's any comfort for Singapore, I was just in another country, which I won't name, talking to a chief advisor to their head of government. They had been talking to the Americans, and they said, well, why don't we do 0 for 0? And they were told, no, we don't do 0 now. 10 is the new 0. So clearly you're in the same world, and 10 is the new 0. And I guess...
it may not be 10.
And it could be whatever it is tomorrow, exactly. So I'm glad I'm a journalist and not a trade chief for a government. I guess one of the overarching frames to so many of your remarks is the sense that I certainly get talking to different governments in recent months, that Trump 2 is distinctively different from Trump 1. That there was in some ways almost a continuity from Trump 1 to the Biden administration, but there's something new about Trump 2 in terms of their approach, this very transactional approach to the world. And so I guess that brings me to a kind of big geopolitics question, because that's my kind of beat. So Singapore has this interesting position you take on geopolitics, that Singapore does not take sides, certainly in the US-China competition, but that you do defend principles. And so where are we now, 6 months into the second Trump presidency? Is it still possible for Singapore to avoid taking sides between certainly, say, US and China? And if your line is that you don't take sides because you defend principles, what is it like to defend principles in the second Trump administration? How is that working for Singapore?
Well, it's even putting President Trump aside, I think the environment is getting more challenging, more competitive. As Singapore develops, I think the lower hanging fruits have all been plucked. I think we are getting into a situation where it's very competitive, and therefore it's important for us to continue to find ways and areas that Singapore can do well and continue to find ways to survive and to continue to progress. So I think Singapore, in the face of a contestation between China and US, we always say that we don't take sides, but in fact we always take sides. We always take the Singapore side. We always want to make sure that Singapore wins, and we always act in the interest of Singapore and Singaporeans. We always adopt principled approach, and this is important for us because then we are looked upon as a very consistent, reliable, and a trusted partner, because our decisions are always based on principles and always take into account Singapore's interests. So I think it's, in a way, like Prime Minister said this morning, we can be quite boring because we are quite consistent, quite predictable, and we always try to explain our position clearly, our principles clearly, so that our partners understand where we are coming from. So I think increasingly, of course, it will be challenging for us to continue to find a way forward, but it is something that we have been doing so and will continue to do so. And what is important is for Singapore to also be nimble. I think that is one of our great value proposition, because we are small, we are compact, we work very closely with our workers, with our businesses, and that's why SBF is here. So we are happy to work very closely with them so that we can move very quickly. And in this uncertain world, as I mentioned just now, there's a lot of uncertainties, but that actually requires countries and economies to be able to respond very quickly to changes in the tariff environment, to changes in the supply chain, reorganization. Countries and economies that are able to move fast, I think, will be the winner. We say the same thing to our SBF and our businesses. Businesses that can move fast and adapt to the new landscape will be the one that will win. They will emerge as a winner. So I will encourage our businesses to adapt themselves, to be ready to move, to change, and the government will lean forward, our agencies will lean forward to support your adaptation to the new environment. And we also want to make sure that our workers are able to embrace the new realities very quickly, and that's why we will invest very heavily on the training and upgrading of our workforce to make sure that they're ready for the future. And that's why we have a scheme called Skills Future Scheme, to prepare our workers with the skills of the future, that they are able to seize the opportunity that will come our way in time to come.
It's a sign of the times that in this morning we heard about predictability, reliability, and then separately about comparative advantages. But actually, in this world that we now live in, being reliable and predictable is your comparative advantage, right? Who knew that that was going to mark you out from some of the other players out there? I'm keen not to abandon trade completely, but given that you're, in addition to your trade portfolio, you're clearly Deputy Prime Minister, I'm going to take the liberty of my geopolitics role to ask you a kind of even larger question about the role of your big partners in Asia. So one of the lines that I hear causing real concern in some of the other governments that I've been visiting in recent months around the world is, can we even take for granted the idea that America is focused on the competition with China above all else and is willing to, for example, pull out of Europe, certainly militarily, to focus all of its efforts on the Asia-Pacific, on the Indo-Pacific? Because I have been surprised by governments in this hemisphere saying, actually, we don't even know if that is true. We have our moments of doubting that this talk of focusing all efforts on the competition with China, focusing all efforts on, say, Taiwan, we don't even know if we can rely on that. There's a possibility that maybe we'll wake up and find the Americans will just pull back completely. Does Singapore have that occasional moments of doubt as you're not sure whether this pullback to focus on Asia is actually the precursor to America pulling back to Hawaii or to San Francisco?
Well, I think you have to take a practical view, because the contestation between US and China is a reality. And they will continue to compete, continue to try to outdo each other. I think that will last for a long time. But it doesn't mean that in between there will be periods of cooperation and collaboration and peaceful coexistence. And we are hoping that the relationship between the two, US and China, will be a stable one. Even while they compete with one another, it doesn't mean that they have to go all out to get at each other. So there is a possibility that both of them can find a way forward while they compete, but at the same time have a stable relationship. I think that's the best for the region, Asia-Pacific region, as well as for the rest of the world. And it is also not possible for the US to devote all its attention to China and neglect the rest of the world. I think the US is quite clear in its mind that China is their main competitor today, and they need to deal with China. But at the same time, they want to keep the rest of the world also engaged. And that is why this trip, when I was in the US, when I spoke to the administration secretaries, I reminded them that it's important to continue to engage Asia, because Asia is a very important part of the world, not just from an economic point of view, but from a security point of view, from geopolitics point of view. It's important for US to continue to be present and engaged in the Asia-Pacific region.
Well, I guess the kind of the very simple way to sum up the question you hear some governments asking is actually, you know, this talk of prioritizers in the American administration who want to abandon Europe to focus on Asia, is actually this just a cover for isolationism? Are we going to see America just kind of pulling back to its own shores completely? Did you detect that in Washington?
Not really. I think when I was in Washington, when I talked to people, I think they are still very keen to continue to engage Europe and continue to do business and to partner Europe. But from time to time, I think the priority may be different, the focus may be different. Some priorities may be urgent and they have to pay attention to. But I think over the long term, both Europe and Asia continue to be a very important part of a US geopolitical strategy. And they do have an Indo-Pacific strategy that they want to engage Asia. And it is important for us to continue to provide that platform for US to engage with us.
So I have one more question for you about uncertainty, but then I'm going to put the audience on the spot. So please, there are microphones. I think we have 4 microphones out in the floor. You know the drill by now. If you have a question for the Deputy Prime Minister, if you can stand behind one of those microphones, I think that's how we're doing it. So you've mentioned uncertainty in so many different contexts, and it's a word you hear in every presidential palace, every Prime Minister's office in the world at the moment. Is there a particular impact for a very trade-intensive country like Singapore if, in at least the short term, one of your speakers this morning, Ambassador Menon, said that one of the things that a government should not do is just kind of wait and see, just postpone all hard decisions. But if I was a member of a board of a big multinational trying to decide whether to move a factory to America because of the pressure to move to America, if that's a 30, 40-year investment worth tens of billions of dollars, the incentive, the temptation to just kind of wait, because there is so much uncertainty, must be enormous. And so at least in the short term, is that kind of just the idea of drift and wasting a few years while we wait to see what happens with America, is that a specific short-term risk for a country like Singapore?
I think there is a risk for countries to adopt a wait-and-see attitude, and even for companies to adopt the same attitude, and you may miss out in many opportunities. The idea is that you can wait, but you should not be just see. You can wait and do, because it's important for us, while we wait for greater certainty, for more of the unknowns to be disclosed, to have greater knowledge. But you know that in the world today, you'll never have a perfect knowledge of everything. So you just have to continue to find ways to move forward in the absence of perfect knowledge, but based on what you know, make your calculations, make your judgment, and move forward. I think that's what business leaders will do. And the business leader will make the right judgment and the right calculation, and to make the specific moves all the time. As for example, for the government and for Singapore, there are certain things that we need to wait and see how it turns out, how it evolves. But at the same time, we are not wasting time. We are continuing to invest in our people, as I mentioned, upgrade our people, prepare them for the future, invest in AI. These are no regret moves. And we are continuing to expand our a network of free trade agreements with more countries, with more regions. And we are also strengthening our partnership within ASEAN. We are deepening our integration. We just finished a negotiation on our upgrade to ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement, ATIGA, and we are going to sign it later this year. And so hopefully we will continue to strengthen ASEAN integration. And we are also exploring collaboration between ASEAN and EU, ASEAN and GCC. We are also strengthening partnership between CPTPP and EU. There are a lot of acronyms, but basically these are trading groups, and we are encouraging a collaboration between trading groups to see how we can move forward while we are waiting to see how the tariff landscape will pan out. At the same time, we are also exploring new areas of collaboration. Digital economy is one area that's very exciting. Despite uncertainty in tariffs, I think the potential for the digital economy is a very promising one, particularly in AI and in the digital payment systems and digital trading system. I think these are areas that are not competitive in nature, but facilitative in nature. So I think these are areas that I think many countries can still come together and to explore ways forward that we can work together despite the uncertainty in tariffs.
It's very striking all day. I'm sure the audience feels the same. There's this kind of focus on agency, not being a passive observer. There's a kind of practical, you can't change the reality of where the world is. But we have a gentleman here behind the microphone, and I'm going to take a couple of questions. So first you, and then directly at the back, there's someone with a lightsaber who is not Darth Vader, but I think it's one of your assistants. So we'll start with the gentleman at the front and work our way back. Three questions, please.
Yes, hi, Matthew Ting from the Silent Foundation. When you approach this kind of negotiations, what kind of strategy do you take? Like, do you try to play hardball or more conciliatory? And how do you make your feelings known to the other party, without hurting them too much?
Asking me.
Yes. And we'll take one.
You're asking.
No. And then we'll take the lady at the microphone in the middle.
Hello.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Gan Kim Yong. My name is Aiko from Catholic Junior College. So to echo what you have said, in light of US's ambiguous enforcement of transshipment and also unclear definition of rules of origin. So, for example, we've seen shifts in supply chain, particularly in sectors like solar manufacturing in Batam. So how might this actually impact ASEAN countries, maybe in their exposure to retaliatory tariffs, but also in maintaining regional trade credibility? Thank you.
And we'll take one last question over there, if that's okay. Then
Thank you, DPM Gan, for negotiating. You look very tired. I hope you get some rest later. But for now, maybe I want to focus on absolute certainties. As you mentioned that tariffs still have massive uncertainties. I want to focus on one certainty, which is the big, beautiful bill and the effects of the US dollar. And how would that impact Singapore, and what are our strategies to mitigate the second-order effects? Thank you.
thank you. So lots of.
Thank you very much. First, on a negotiating strategy and approach, that's our secret. but I think it depends on specific situation, and also depends on the other party, your counterpart, and depending on what is his interest, where he's coming from. The art of negotiation really is to know what he needs and what he can give, and to also understand what we need and what we can give. If we can give what he needs and he can give us what we need, that's perfect solution. But very often, what you need is what he doesn't want to give, and what he needs is what you don't want to give, and that's where the problem is. So really, the negotiation, you have to go through the process of discovery, of understanding where he's coming from, let him understand where we are coming from, and therefore we try to find common space so that we can have a common agreement. Sometimes in negotiation, you may arrive at some agreement, and you may also agree that certain areas that we cannot agree, and we just have to agree to disagree. So I think that's a process of discussion and negotiation. I think very often you find that bilateral negotiations is easier because it's just between you and me, and I know you, you know me, so we can find a solution. But when it comes to multilateral agreement, it's a lot more difficult when you have multi-parties involved, because then you have to make sure that everyone's interest is taken care of and everyone's concerns are addressed, and that's a lot more challenging. But having said that, I think at the end of the day, you still have to come, hopefully you are able to come up with a win-win situation. And in today's world, even win-win, it doesn't mean that both sides will win equally. Sometimes one side may win more, the other side may win less, but at the end, if both sides can have a winning outcome, I think at least you have a basis to move forward. If it is negotiating for a win-lose outcome, I think it's going to be very difficult. And therefore, when you go into a negotiation situation, from our point of view, first I will have to decide whether I have a win-win proposition that when I put it on the table, you will see that it will benefit you and it will also benefit Singapore. I think that you have a basis to start to negotiate, start to narrow the gaps between the demands from both sides, and hopefully you can have a win-win outcome on a negotiation. I hope that answers your question in principle, so I can't go into details on specifics. And on the second question on the rules of origin, thank you very much for the question. In fact, that is one of the uncertainty and one of the challenges that we have. And it's not just the definition, and however you define the rules of origin, the enforcement is another challenge, because you have to be able to trace where the origin comes from and verify where it comes from. Let's say, for example, if I buy something from Malaysia, I can say that under my rules of origin, the product's origin is Malaysia. But it doesn't mean that the product is produced in Malaysia. It may be produced in somewhere else, like in Thailand. So therefore, under rules of origin, it should be Thailand. But it is very difficult for me to find out where Malaysia has acquired the product from. So the rules of origin, how it is defined, is very different from country to country. And therefore, between US and the trading partners, we have to sit down and determine and decide how rules of origin is defined. Having defined that, we have to figure out how to enforce, how to track the rules of origin so that it is effective. So I think those are the uncertainties that we have to work through, and you're right that it will have an impact on the intra-ASEAN trade, because whether rules of origin applies, whether therefore you pay a lower tariff or higher tariff depending on how the rules of origin will apply to your product is something that is yet to be clarified. So I think we just have to wait and see how the outcome of the disclosure from announcement from the US. And the last question on the big and beautiful bill. So I think if I know the ultimate impact on US dollars, I will be a billionaire. The question is, I think it's very difficult to predict how it will impact on businesses and the US dollar, the currency. But I would say that the objective of the bill is really to institutionalize the tax incentives that was announced during President Trump's first term. And this, by introducing this bill, it will institutionalize these tax incentives, and this will give investors more confidence that these tax incentives will last for many years, and it's not just from year to year. So I think that will give confidence in the investors to invest in the US, and that will go towards President Trump's onshoring strategy to bring back to US many of the manufacturing investments. So I think that will be the immediate impact on investment and on businesses, and that of course will then have a consequential impact on the exchange rates.
We have long lines of people, so I'm going to just work from the front, take one from the front and then one from the middle, please. And if you could introduce yourself, say who you are.
Hi there, I'm Prajna from Raffles Girls School. Thank you, Minister, for the interesting presentation. As has been discussed, the world is evidently changing rapidly. I've seen 2 wars start and I haven't even written my O-levels yet. Amidst what Singapore's government and businesses can do, what role do you think, if any, that the youth and other citizens, regardless of age or job, can play in helping Singapore to flourish in this shifting global economy? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Deputy Prime Minister Khan. In the last election, we were charged with the role as the task force man of the current administration. It worked very well. Even Prime Minister Wong said that what he has not covered in the morning will be picked up by you in the afternoon. I am Albert Cheng from the Singapore Bullion Market Association, a trade association for the precious metal industry. In line with the Singapore ambition to position as a global city, our industry also embarked on a journey to transform from a regional gold hub to a global gold hub, and also for other precious metal from 2019. All our members are aligned now and has dialogue with the couple of related government ministries. However, I felt our vision need to be multi-ministry public-private partnership. That means we need to set up a PPP task force. My question is, how should we go about it and who we should talk to? Can I call upon your office?
And we'll take one last question from the front, from Professor Koh.
Thank you, DPM. I'm here.
Okay, Prof.
Welcome back from Washington. You don't look tired, you look very well.
Thank you, thank you.
I want to ask you about 2 sectors which are very important to our economy, pharmaceutical and semiconductor. Can you confirm that you didn't have an opportunity to engage the US administration on these 2 sectors?
First, let me answer the question on the youth role. I think the youth today plays a very important role to prepare yourself for the future. And I think the future is full of uncertainties, full of challenges, full of risks, but that's the bad news. The good news is, actually, it's also full of opportunities. So the key is for our younger generation to prepare yourself, to always be on the lookout for new and emerging opportunities, to always upgrade yourself to make sure that you master the skills of the future, and to embrace change, and because change is the only constant, as we always say. So I think this is something that the youth can do. But at the same time, even as you grow the economy, develop the economy, also pay attention to strengthening your social fabric, making sure that no one is left behind. Work together with the community, work together with the society to make sure that you continue to find ways to uplift the society and the community. I think that is important for our youth as you move forward to face the challenges of the future. Just now you mentioned about the task force man. Thank you very much. And if you have any problem, you can always email to me. If no one else answers your email, I will answer your email. Don't worry. I will. Do you have my email? I'll give you my email. Any one of you, if you want, you can always email me. My email is gan_Kim_Yong. That's my name. So gan_Kim_Yong @MTI. That's my ministry. @mti.gov government.sg Singapore. So gan_Kim_Yong @mti.gov.sg. Yeah? So you write to me. If you have any problem, you need someone to bring together multi-ministry, multi-agency to address your issue. But my suggestion is actually SBF does a very important role in helping. I'm not arrowing them. I'm just stating a fact, and to give them due credit because they do actually do good work in working with the TACs, or our trade association and chambers, to help them, to uplift them, to share with them what are the schemes that are available, and also help them address some of the government agency issues so that you come together as an industry So I think you can talk to SBF. I don't know the president's email. Maybe you can ask from him later on. But I've already given you my email. If you want, you can email to me and I'll email to him if it is appropriate. Yeah? Prof, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, I did not have a chance to discuss pharma and semiconductor during this trip. We did have a discussion on the pharmaceuticals earlier on, and officials are continuing to discuss on the pharmaceuticals, on the collaboration between US and Singapore on pharmaceuticals. That's at the official level. I didn't have a chance to speak to the secretary on this specifically. Semiconductor, we have not started discussing on semiconductor with regard to the tariff. With regard to access to AI chips and so on, we have discussion on how we can make sure that we will continue to have access to the AI equipment and semiconductors where necessary. So I think this is something that we have discussed, but not specifically on the tariff on the semiconductors.
And we have lots of questions coming in through the QR code, but I'm going to prioritize actual human beings standing at microphones, because that seems, despite the AI feature that awaits us, I'm going to give the humans rather than the iPad priority for now. So, madam.
DPM, I'm Hui Ling from SPH Chinese Media Group. My question is not related to tariffs or the economy, but we often see you on your social media platform. There are just basically two scenes. Scene one, it's you are taking off, flying to somewhere to negotiate, or there are some bilateral visits or conferences. Scene two is you are in Punggol, meeting your residents. My question is, how do you think this is sustainable for SG60 and beyond? What does it take to attract talent to do this very demanding job that you are doing right now?
Thank you very much. Second question.
We have one more at the back. Yeah.
I'm very eager to answer that one.
Hi, Deputy Prime Minister Gan. Thank you so much for working so over here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for working so tirelessly for Singapore. My question is regards to the sectoral tariffs, in particular pharmaceutical. Can you give us a sense of what the US side is trying to look for? And in particular, I think in your previous remarks, you have mentioned about secure supply chains in your remarks to media. And of course, things have evolved since then. Japan has provided this investment fund, among things. So yeah, could you give us a sense of what exactly the US side is trying to look for from your perspective? Thank you.
Two questions.
Oh, actually, we have a third question there. So, yeah, this microphone.
Thank you, David. Bernice Ang from Sirius Labs, Research in Complex Adaptive Systems. Thank you for your insights, even after all your travels, DPM. Earlier today, John Denton of the ICC remarked in his keynote that this is a moment, the current moment is not one of breakdown, but of transformation, and that how things go will depend on the actions we take now. Yeah, sorry, and that connects to what you said about DPM on trade and global norms in a changing geopolitical landscape. Looking ahead to 2030 or even 2035, what do you see as a key driver or trend, whether economic, social, political, etc., that might make the difference between transformation and breakdown? And if you're feeling game, how optimistic or pessimistic are you that we are in transformation and not breakdown?
Thank you. First, let me answer Hui Ling's question. I think the key really is you must enjoy what you're doing. When I visit countries, I enjoy meeting people, getting to understand their thinking, and I find it always fascinating that you discover their thinkings are very different from our own thinking. So when you meet the Americans, you understand their psyche, their approach, why they do certain things. And when you understand their reasons, there's certain rationale to what they do, and you look at your own perspective, they realize the difference, and that difference is sometimes very enlightening, and that helps you to better understand how you can deal with them, how you can cooperate with them. It's not just Americans. I think every country is different. So when I visit countries, other than going to Expo and visit our discovery, our pavilion, when I meet people, I think that discovery is very exciting. In Pongo is a different approach, and when I spend time in Pongo, I always treat that as spending time with my friends, because I'm sure in the evenings you also go out with your friends, have dinner, have activities, do things that you like. So whenever I go down to visit my residents in Pongo, I treat them as visiting my friends, having a dinner with my friends. Going to do house visit is like visiting my friends in my friend's house. So in a way, you get to know more of your friends. You enjoy doing it. You get excited, looking forward to doing these things. So you don't feel tired, because I'm sure you don't feel tired going out with friends at night, right? So I think if you take that approach, I think it will be more sustainable. Not the carbon emission sense, but the more sustainable in terms of your interest and your engagement. But if you look at it as just a job, I think you'll be very tired, and you will burn out very soon. So I think when we do these things, you need to do it with a bit of interest, and you must really like doing it. So you wake up in the morning, you get excited, you say, oh, I'm going to do this and that today. But if you wake up in the morning and say, oh no, I'm going to do this and that today, I think it's very hard to get out of bed. So I will encourage you, all of us, to have a positive approach to doing whatever we do, so that we enjoy doing it and it will be sustainable in the long term. On pharmaceutical, what is needed, or what is US looking for? I'm afraid I can't go into details, because negotiation is ongoing, and there's a bit of a confidentiality we need to maintain on both sides. But I think in general, I can explain to you that because of the experience that they have during COVID-19, where the supplies of critical pharmaceuticals were disrupted. So they were very concerned. They want to make sure that they have a secure supply line of pharmaceuticals. Some of it, or the bulk of it, they do want to see whether they can onshore this production so that they can produce themselves. But they also know that it's not possible to onshore everything, because some of the raw materials are actually outside of America. So they do need to think about how they can work with partners, trusted partners, to make sure that the supply chain is secure and reliable. So that is what they are looking for in their partners, including Singapore. How can Singapore be a reliable partner in the pharmaceutical supplies to the US? So I think, as David said just now, Singapore, we have always prided ourselves as a trusted and reliable partner. I think that plays to our strength in the pharmaceutical discussion with the US. I can only say so much, because my colleague is already shaking his head and said, don't go into too much detail, because there's confidentiality between the two. On the last issue on transformation, I like that phrase, because whether it's a transformation or breakdown really depends on the perspective. And if you are able to embrace the change and move very quickly and stay nimble, and as I mentioned earlier, Singapore's key strength really is in our being small. So small is not a disadvantage. It is in some ways, but it is also an advantage that we are able to move very quickly. We have a very compact society and economy, so we can make changes very quickly. And what is also very important, which other countries find it hard to replicate, and that is we have a very, very strong tripartite relationship between the business, the union, and the government. Whenever there's a crisis, the tripartite partners will come together, address the issue, and work with one another to solve the problem, and not try to push the problem to the other party. So this is something that is very hard for other countries to replicate. And this is actually one of our key strengths. So whenever there's a challenge, there's a difficulty, there's an economic crisis, we bring together the tripartite partners to sit on the same table and find a solution together. And we can move forward together. So businesses will cut costs to save jobs. I have to say this very carefully, otherwise it's very confusing. Instead of cut jobs to save costs. I think this was our approach for many economic crises. Always cut costs in order to save jobs, and rather than cut jobs to save costs. And unions also know, the labor movement also know, if the businesses don't do well, there's no way you can make sure that the workers will be well treated. Because the businesses are not making money, they cannot give bonuses to the workers. Even if they do give bonuses to the worker, it will not be sustainable. So I think the unions also know, in order for the workers to be treated well, they must make sure that the business do well. And the government knows that we need to lean forward to support both the businesses and the workers so that the economy will do well. And this is a transformation process, because every transformation is painful. And every transformation, there will always be challenges. But because of our tripartite relationship, we are able to bring together the key stakeholders and work together rather than to work against each other. And therefore, instead of breaking down, because we compete with one another, we fight each other, we work together and undertake the transformation. So I like that word very much. Thank you very much.
It's good to hear that Singapore still has confidential negotiations. Obviously, the lesson I think everyone is learning as a foreign leader is never send a message by text to President Trump, because the entire chain of text messages will turn up on Truth Social. So we have a question that's getting upvoted on the iPad from Daniel Ang about sustainable and inclusive growth. I don't know if it's going to come up on the screen. So I'm going to read it out. It may come up on the screen in a second. As you celebrate Singapore 60, SG60, how does Singapore ensure sustainable and inclusive growth in the next 60 years? How do we make things happen? So 我看到一个双语的问题, but I'm just going to, I know it's Singapore, so we're going to do English only. How do we make things happen instead of watching things happen? And how do you, or if you don't know what is going to happen to you?
This is a very interesting phrase. I used that during one of my parliamentary speeches because I said there are three types of people. One who knows what's happening, one that doesn't know what's happening, and there's a third one that don't know what hits him. So I think it's important for us to always be able to know what's happening, monitor carefully so that we can continue to develop good policy to support our growth and our progress moving forward. And that is why we set up the CERT task force, the Singapore Economic Resilience Task Force. One of the first work stream on the task force is really to monitor the development, to make sense of the information that's coming through, because every morning you wake up, there's always new news about the tariff, about the negotiation, how to make sense of all of them so that we are in the know. We are able to help our economy, our businesses, to make changes that may be necessary, to adapt to the new reality, and to move forward and to continue to do well. And that is why this is an important part of the CERT task force function. And therefore, I think even as we celebrate the SG60, it's important for us to learn from our experience over the last 60 years, the challenges that we've gone through and how we have been able to overcome them, to learn from the mistakes that we have made. I'm sure we have made mistakes as well. And for example, our COVID-19, what are the lessons that we can learn and how we can apply them to prepare ourselves for the future. So I think this is something that we will have to continue to work on and to learn. And how to make sure that our growth and development is sustainable and inclusive is something that I think is a new social compact that we have to develop, that we have to evolve together. And that's why we have this Forward Singapore conversation to discuss how we can move together, progress together as a society, as a nation, as a community, so that we leave no one behind, that our growth can continue to be sustainable and to be inclusive. But I must sound a word of caution that this is not something that's easily done. And it has to be, all of us have to be very conscious about this this approach and this intention. And we need to continue to re-examine our policies regularly, because as the situation changes, the policies that we have 10 years ago may no longer be relevant, may no longer be sustainable or inclusive. And therefore, we must be prepared to adjust, to adapt, and to change when the situation warrants it. So we should leave no stone unturned We should examine all our assumptions, review all our policies from time to time to make sure that we are able to stay relevant for the future, to make sure that our growth, our development will continue to be inclusive as well as sustainable in the long term.
So we have a question that has lots of upvotes, which is quite a kind of bleak take on the value of even trying to negotiate a deal with this American administration. But I guess it gets to the point that, you know, Singapore is one of the countries with an FTA, and that doesn't seem to have protected you from the baseline tariffs. So Frank Debets has a question which may come up on the screen. So he asks, is it even worthwhile pursuing a deal with the US, which is likely to be shallow or narrow, possibly vague and uncertain, whether it's even going to be honored in the future? I'm sure plenty of trade ministers ask themselves these questions as you fly for the nth time across the Pacific. Well, what's the answer to that?
Can I ask, where is Frank? Okay. Can I ask, what are your views? I mean, this is a dialogue, right? So it cannot be, are you giving all the answers? Frank, I'm sure you have a view. What do you think?
Thanks, DPM. Yeah, as you know, I do like to ask devil's advocate questions. Honestly, I think it is worthwhile, because walking away from a negotiating table is never a good idea. But I do worry that the way, certainly it's reported in the press, that the countries that have signed a deal, that were first movers, like a UK or a Vietnam, the press reporting and even some of the officials are now saying, well, we're not sure whether this was really a good deal, whether maybe we rushed into something that wasn't worthwhile just to maybe be first past the post. So it's a really difficult question. I wouldn't have asked it if I knew the answer, if I had an answer. But I know from many conversations I have that a lot of people worry, you're a busy man. Is it really the best spend of your time on this?
Thank you very much. I think you more or less answer your own question. I think in a way, FTAs are very important for Singapore. We are a very, very small country, a very small economy. Trade is 3 times our GDP. So trade is very critical to us, and therefore free trade agreements are important for us. Even with the US, when they have imposed a baseline tariff on Singapore, it is also important to bear in mind that if not for the free trade agreement, we may not have a baseline tariff, maybe something else. This is hypothetical, so it's very difficult to guess. But it is also important to bear in mind that the platform, the framework of FTA is not just about tariff-free. It's not just about trade between the 2 countries. In the process of negotiating the free trade agreement, it actually deepens understanding between the 2 countries. We understand where your concerns are, you understand where our concerns are, and as we go through the FTA and as we implement the FTA, we build this trust and confidence in each other. So that is one reason why US today look at Singapore as a trusted partner, as a reliable partner, because we have honored our side of the bargain, our agreement on the FTA. And US, despite the FTA, has decided to impose a tariff on Singapore. And within the FTA, of course, you're supposed to have 0 tariff both sides. But within the FTA, it has also provisions for tariffs to be imposed on certain reasons, on certain grounds. So I won't go into that details, but I think it's suffice to say that FTA has a value in strengthening the trade between the 2 countries and to also put us in a stronger position as we negotiate tariffs with the US. And it's also in the process of developing and implementing the FTA that has strengthened the understanding between US and Singapore. And there are many things that we can work together. And because of our partnership in the FTA, that has allowed us to embark on other collaboration in whether it's digital, whether it's sustainability, climate change challenges, and so on. And as you know, we recently signed a 123 agreement with the US that has allowed us to have access to the civilian use of nuclear energy, knowledge, and technology in the US. So I think we hope that with this relationship, this trusted partnership, that will give us access to many of the technology that we will need in time to come. It's not just energy, and it's also R&D, innovation, AI capability, and many areas that we can work together as partners, both in the US as well as in Singapore and in this region.
Deputy Prime Minister, can I ask you to take that question and use it really to help us understand, how do you see the logic of what the Trump administration is doing? Because I covered the first Trump administration as our DC bureau chief and interviewed President Trump a couple of times. And there's this kind of, I think, a lazy idea that it's all just kind of random caprice, the mood that he wakes up in. But there is a logic, whether you like the logic or whether you don't like the logic. There is a logic there. And clearly, if you're trying to understand, as in your role, negotiating these deals, there's a certain incoherence. You have the tariffs are set high, and then you're told it's an invitation to cut deals and to lower the tariffs. But on the other hand, they don't want them to disappear because they're making revenues from the tariffs. And they also want the tariffs to be in place to bring jobs back to America. So it's certainly true that many different ambitions are going into the mix. But when you spend time with his officials, when you spend time with this administration, do you come away with the sense that actually there is a logic that ties all of these different moving parts together, however frustrating it must be to deal with it day to day?
I think there is a rationale on what the US is doing. Whether you agree or not, that's a separate issue. And if you look at it, there are actually three key considerations. First, if you look at the baseline tariff, it is fundamentally for purposes of generating revenue for the US administration, partly to fund the tax incentives for the companies and other expenses. So it's a revenue instrument for the US administration. That's for the baseline tariff. So every country basically pay the baseline, and on top of that, some countries will pay reciprocal tariffs. And the reciprocal tariffs really is an instrument that the administration uses to try to balance the trade, and therefore the reciprocal tariffs is country-specific. If you have a huge trade deficit, trade surplus with the US, or US has a huge trade deficit with you, then they are likely to impose a higher reciprocal tariff to balance the trade, to discourage you from selling more to the US and to encourage you from buying more from the US. So I think that is to balance the trade between the two countries. Then the US has also a third interest to onshore, to bring back manufacturing into the US, particularly in the critical industries like semiconductor, pharmaceuticals, as we mentioned earlier. And this is done through the specific, product-specific sectoral tariffs. So it's not specific to specific countries, but specifically on certain products. Steel, aluminum, for example, they want to bring back some of the heavy industries to create jobs, and that's why they have a heavy tariff on steel, aluminum, and automobile. So I think these are product-specific, and the purpose is really to onshore some of the industries, bring back investments into the US. So there are three objectives: revenue, balancing the trade, as well as bringing investments. Of course, they are not really mutually exclusive. So some instruments are used for both revenue as well as the trade balance. But generally, the baseline tariff is for revenue. The reciprocal tariffs is meant for trade balance, and the sectoral tariffs is meant for investments and reshoring. In between, of course, as I said, is not mutually exclusive totally.
This morning we heard a lot, as you would expect, about climate and the green transition. If we're even in the subject of tariffs and uncertainty, you have to add that to the list, right? I mean, I remember, and this is a whiplash we saw with the first Trump administration. I remember when I was in Beijing as the Beijing bureau chief, there was an EU-China summit just after President Trump had walked out of the Paris Agreement in his first administration, and a friendly ambassador leaked to me the comments between Xi Jinping and the European Union leaders in Beijing, and he said, Obama told me if I wanted to be taken seriously as a world power, I had to join the Paris Accord and get serious about climate. They have an election, and suddenly they leave Paris. You know, what am I supposed to do with these people? So that was Xi Jinping in, I think, 2018, expressing his frustration. So here we are back in second Trump administration. Under Biden, you had enormous subsidies on offer for green tech. tremendous opportunities to work with the Americans on green tech. You in Singapore, you don't have your own natural resources. You're very interested in going green, particularly as you power things like your digital future, AI. How do you put together, to add to the list of uncertainties? You need to go green. You want to work with the Americans, but suddenly, with a change of government from Biden to Trump too, they're no longer at all interested in going green. And indeed, sometimes some of his officials sound pretty hostile to the very idea of green energy. They want everyone to be burning fossil fuels. So how does that factor into your relationship with America, but your desire to go green at the same time?
Well, I think amidst all the uncertainties, climate change is a certainty. I think whether you like it or not, whether you are part of the Paris Agreement or not, global warming will continue. And this year is the hottest year in Singapore's history. I can almost assure you next year will still be the hottest year in our history. It just gets hotter every year. So I think climate change challenge is a real one. And it is important for countries around the world to come together and to work together to solve this problem, because it's a wicked problem that is very difficult to solve. And despite our best efforts, we can only slow it down. It will not likely to be able to reverse course. So I think we really need to find opportunities to come together, to work together. But I'm quietly, cautiously glad to see that actually it's not just the government. I think the consumers are slowly changing. I think many of the businesses that we talk to, despite the withdrawal of US from the Paris Agreement, they want to continue with their climate investments because they know that their customers demand it. And therefore, I think once a market is able to move, to change, and to focus on climate change, and to focus on green solutions, I think businesses will change. I think that is a more sustainable impetus. I think no amount of a government push will change. I think the consumer's push is the most effective in changing it. Having said that, I think it's still important for governments to come together, to work together, to find solutions together. And one example is the green energy, as you mentioned. Among the ASEAN members, different countries have a different profile. Some countries have excess green power. Some countries are in need of green energy. And if we are able to work together, I think we will have a better balance. And those who need will have green energy. Those who have excess will then be able to sell the green energy. And that is why we revived the idea of an ASEAN integrated power grid. And this project is not a new one, as I mentioned many times. Actually, we formulated the project some 20, 25 years ago. There wasn't an impetus for us to push ahead with the project because there's no real need to connect up the entire ASEAN power grid. But now with the need for green energy, I think, and to achieve a better balance of a green energy source and supply and demand, I think this integrated power grid idea becomes a reality. So I think the ASEAN members are working very closely together to realize this ASEAN integrated power grid. But it's a huge project. It will take many years to fully realize the project, and it probably has to be done in phases, in segments, not in one go. So I think it's something that we are working through, and hopefully in time to come, we have a very robust ASEAN integrated power grid, and we have a better balance in terms of demand and supply of the green energy in ASEAN. And that is a demonstration of how countries can work together to address sustainability issues rather than to work individually and to be isolated.
And just a quick follow-up on that from a question we had from the floor. So you've set out very neatly that there are stakeholders and Singapore has agency, ASEAN has agency. But we have a question from Sarah on the floor. How do you see US tariffs affecting the pace and scale of the green energy transition?
Sorry?
How do you see US tariffs affecting the pace and scale of the green transition?
I think tariffs as a whole, in general, from an economics point of view, will add cost to the entire economy. And that will slow down economic progress, economic growth, because higher costs will mean a lower demand, and therefore the economy overall will slow down. That's just a general impact of tariffs And it's not just a US tariff, because countries will then may have to erect their own tariffs to protect their own market, because if you have access from US products into your market, you need to protect your market against other imports, and therefore you may need to erect new tariffs. And overall, it may result in rounds of tariff adjustments, and that will create cost to the economy. And once you slow down the demand, raise the cost, and slow down the growth of the economy, then you have less resources at hand for you to use for other applications like green solutions. So I think in a way, the tariffs will slow down the resources that will be available to tackle the climate change challenges. And on top of that, it may also specifically slow down specific industries that are related to climate change. So I think those in the longer term will mean that our efforts towards tackling the climate change solution will be affected.
So friction, but you have a plan to keep moving forwards.
But it's important for us, despite these challenges and uncertainties, I think there's still room for countries to come together, to work together, as I mentioned earlier, not just on climate change, but on economy, on the innovation, on R&D, on even new drug discovery, solutions to aging, for development of care solutions. I think there are many areas that we can come together and work together and put our minds together to find solutions and to invest in these solutions together. One example is the ASEAN Integrated Power Grid. There will be is a possibility for many countries to participate in this ASEAN Integrated Power Grid, to be an investor in this so that we can move forward together. So I think there are still a lot of opportunities for countries to come together, to work together, despite the challenges of tariffs being imposed on all the countries around the world.
Thank you so much. We've covered a lot of ground. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you for your good questions.
May I now invite Director of the Institute of Policy Studies, Mr. Janadas Devan, on stage to deliver his closing remarks. Mr. Devan, please.
Thank you, DPM and David, for that excellent dialogue. It is impossible to summarize this conference, but perhaps I might just, in conclusion, highlight 3 points that struck me. Number one, almost all the speakers from PM in the morning to DPM in the afternoon seem to agree that the world has changed and there is no going back. The post-Trump world, yes, I think this too shall pass one day, but alas, we won't go back to some pre-lapsarian era. Number two, despite the severe challenges, if not threats, to the current global rules-based trading system, globalization is not utterly erased. Multilateralism has not been demolished. We may now have, as they say, a G- world, but that doesn't mean the rest of the world is going to cease dealing with each other. And finally, something of relevance to us on the occasion of Singapore's 60th anniversary, we are not helpless. We are not without agency, as the Prime Minister said this morning. It remains for me to thank all those who contributed to this conference, to begin with our partner, SBF, Singapore Business Federation, its chairman, Mr. S.S. Teo, its CEO, Ping Sun, and all their staff. Second, the Firefly agencies, to begin with MTI, Economic Development Board of Singapore and Enterprise Singapore, and IPS's own mothership, NUS, and its president, Professor Tan Eng Chai. Thanks also to MasterCard, Jurong Port, JTC, and Hyundai for hosting the spotlights on future-ready businesses, plus the 54 other organizations who supported this conference in one way or another. Their names are all listed on the screens. Finally, I wish to thank my IPS colleagues who worked for more than 6 months organizing this conference, Gillian Koh and the team that organized the logistics of this conference, Sealing, Vani, Zahida, Emmanuel, and there are others in IPS. I don't know. Thank you. I'm not sure whether we'll organize this conference on the 70th anniversary, but we'll certainly be organizing the 75th anniversary conference, the next great milestone. So do not fear, we'll still be around. Thank you.